A white tub with black letters spelling naked. No flashy colors, no lifestyle slogans, no airbrushed models. On paper, it's the cleanest protein you could buy, a brand that claims to strip away everything unnecessary. But beneath that label, the story isn't quite so simple. In October 2025, Consumer Reports tested dozens of protein powders across the country. Among all the names that claim honesty and health, Naked Vegan Mass Gainer stood out for the wrong reason. Independent analysis found 7.7 micrograms of lead per serving, the highest amount of any powder tested that year. For context, that's roughly 15 times what California's Proposition 65 recommends as a safe daily limit. And yet it sits in stores labeled as pure plant-based and clean. That's the uncomfortable part of the wellness industry. Purity has become an image, not a metric. Naked Nutrition built its reputation on minimalism, on transparency, on the comforting idea that fewer ingredients mean fewer problems. But in this case, less didn't mean safer. The brand never disputed the lab's findings, only pointed out that their product met federal limits, a statement that is technically true, and yet quietly misleading. Because federal limits are outdated, written when average exposure from other sources, soil cookware air was far lower than it is today. And when you consume something every morning, even a trace becomes a total. Lead doesn't leave the body easily. It lingers in the bones, builds in the blood, and steals energy before anyone feels the theft. That's not a scare tactic, it's basic toxicology. For one retiree who switched to plant-based protein after a mild heart scare, the appeal was simplicity. "I just wanted something my doctor wouldn't frown at," he said. No chemicals, no sugar. He kept the tub on his counter, scooped twice a day, and felt proud of the habit. Then he read the report and stopped mid-shake. "I couldn't believe it," he told us. How could something called Naked be hiding anything? Furthermore, this isn't an isolated case. Many plant-based powders test higher for heavy metals because peas and rice draw minerals from soil more efficiently than dairy proteins. But the difference here is branding. Naked Nutrition sells purity. It's in the name on the tub and in the buyer's mind. So when that illusion breaks, trust breaks deeper. That's the part no one expects from a brand called Naked. The label stays clean while the scoop carries a residue invisible to the eye. In the end, this isn't about one company. It's about a pattern, how the simplest packaging can disarm skepticism, how the word clean can outshine the evidence. And for older consumers, the ones trying to stay strong without gimmicks, that quiet trust is the most dangerous vulnerability of all. So if you see that bare white tub on the shelf, think twice before reaching for it. Purity shouldn't have to prove itself in a courtroom or a lab, because sometimes what looks most honest leaves the deepest mark. Can a powder designed by algorithms ever escape the flaws of the earth it came from? That's the question now facing Huel, the company that promised to replace breakfast, lunch, and dinner with science itself. Sold as a complete food, it was meant to make eating efficient, a blend of peas, flax, and rice engineered for perfect nutrition. But perfection, it turns out, depends on what you choose to measure. Just a few days ago, Consumer Reports tested dozens of protein powders and found Huel Black Edition contained 6.3 micrograms of lead per serving. That number earned it a place on the publication's rare Do Not Consume list, a warning reserved for only 2 products that year. Dr. Margaret Sears, a toxicologist specializing in environmental exposure, explained it simply: lead doesn't need to be high to be harmful. It just needs to be daily. Her statement puts Huel's data in perspective. Even trace amounts taken day after day can quietly accumulate in bones and soft tissue, affecting energy levels, blood pressure, and cognition over time. Behind the formula, the explanation is surprisingly old-fashioned. Pea and flax proteins are grown in mineral-dense soil that naturally absorbs metals. No digital model can rewrite that chemistry. When those plants are ground processed and packaged, the trace elements stay behind, invisible, tasteless, and well within federal limits that haven't been updated in decades. Meanwhile, Huel's response followed the typical corporate rhythm: calm, technical, reassuring. The company stated that its products meet all international safety standards, and that independent tests show levels consistent with background dietary exposure. In fairness, that is true, but as one food safety consultant noted, compliance isn't the same as safety. It only means the rules are old enough to be convenient. That distinction matters most for older adults, the very audience drawn to Huel's simplicity. For many, the powder represented control, predictable nutrition, less cooking, fewer variables. Yet the findings revealed that even the most calculated diet can inherit the imperfections of nature itself. Progress shouldn't taste like lead. Nutrition scientist Dr. David Carpenter once warned that the next wave of health risks won't come from lack of food, but from the false precision of modern food design. His words echo here. The problem isn't technology. It's forgetting that the body doesn't run on numbers, it runs on trust. As the data shows, the concern is slow accumulation, not shock exposure. Lead doesn't cause illness overnight, it quietly rewrites what normal feels like. And that's why many researchers now urge companies to publish full heavy metal test results, lot by lot, instead of hiding behind regulatory averages. Transparency, they argue, is the only ingredient missing from complete food. If the future of nutrition still carries traces of the past, perhaps the next breakthrough won't come from new formulas, but from accountability. Until then, the smartest thing about smart food may be learning when to stop trusting the label. You buy something called organic and you just expect it to be safe. You shouldn't need to double check the label, read the fine print, or search legal databases just to know what's inside your protein shake. But that's exactly what some customers discovered about Sun Warrior, a brand that sold purity in a pouch, then found its name tied to a legal warning most shoppers never even heard of. In April, a small line appeared in California's public records, a Proposition 65 notice filed against Sun Warrior Sport Organic Active Protein Unflavored, alleging that the powder exposed consumers to lead levels above the state's threshold. Weeks later, a formal complaint followed. There was no press release, no recall, no banner on the company's website, just silence. For a brand that built its image on trust and transparency, the quiet felt louder than any statement could. At first, it sounded like one of those distant legal stories that never touch real life. Then people started finding out by accident, a blog post here, a Reddit thread there. One customer said she discovered it while searching for smoothie recipes. I had the bag right on my counter, she wrote. It said clean and organic. I thought that meant something. That's the heart of the problem. Prop 65 isn't a recall law. It doesn't remove anything from shelves. It just demands that companies warn consumers if their products might expose them to chemicals known to cause harm. But unless you go digging through public filings, you'll never see the warning. It's a safety net written in invisible ink. Meanwhile, the packaging stayed beautiful earthy colors, the word sport printed like a badge of discipline. The promise of raw, plant, performance still radiated confidence. You'd never guess a lawyer had touched that product. By the time most people found out, months had passed. The company hadn't broken a federal rule. It had only stepped into a gray zone, compliant on paper, questionable in spirit. And that's the unsettling truth: a product can be legal and still not feel right. One longtime customer told us he felt fooled, but not angry. He said, "I don't expect everything to be perfect. I just wish they told us. I would have stopped buying it. I thought that word organic meant I didn't have to worry. Clean label, court label, same product." That's the paradox of modern trust. The government calls it disclosure, the company calls it compliance, the consumer calls it confusion. In the end, everyone is technically correct and nobody feels safe. It's easy to forget that organic used to mean something simple, grown clean, handled with care, free from shortcuts. Now it feels like a word stretched too thin, worn out by repetition and lawsuits. And the more it's printed, the less weight it seems to carry. Sun Warrior will likely settle quietly, pay a fine promise, more testing, and keep the same label on the same shelf. Nothing will look different except maybe the buyer a little more cautious, a little less trusting. Maybe that's how modern health works now. We don't just read the label, we read the lawsuit. And maybe somewhere along the way, organic stopped being a promise and started being a performance. It looked kind on the shelf and tasted fine in the glass, but something never sat right. You finish the shake and your stomach files a complaint. It isn't pain exactly, just pressure, a slow heaviness that doesn't match the word organic on the label. For many people, that quiet discomfort began with one friendly-looking tub, KOS Organic Plant Protein Vanilla. To begin, this brand story sounds reassuring. Family-owned, cheerful marketing, pastel packaging, and a promise of goodness you can feel. It's easy to trust because it doesn't talk like a supplement, it talks like comfort. But look closer, and the simplicity starts to unravel. Inside that creamy taste is a blend of pea protein coconut milk powder, inulin chicory root guar gum, and natural flavors ingredients that give the shake its smooth texture and dessert appeal. They're not inherently bad, but for sensitive stomachs, that combination can be a storm in disguise. Inulin and chicory fiber, for instance, help with thickness and sweetness, but they ferment in the gut. What follows is often gas bloating and that quiet ache most people blame on lunch. From there, the picture deepens. In February, KOS was one of several plant-based protein makers named in a Proposition 65 notice in California for alleged lead exposure beyond warning limits. It's an allegation, not a conviction, no recall, no public apology. But for those who already didn't feel great after drinking it, the headline confirmed a suspicion they couldn't name. Maybe the discomfort wasn't just digestion. Maybe it was accumulation. Before long, users began posting stories online. "I love the taste, but it made me bloated. Felt heavy every time I used it. Too sweet for my stomach. Those comments didn't sound like science yet, they pointed to something real. Because when a powder depends on thickeners, sugar alcohols, and natural flavor enhancers to taste indulgent, it often trades short-term satisfaction for long-term strain. In plain terms, your body keeps the score. The gut works harder to process the gums. The liver filters traces of minerals that never leave quickly. Energy drops without explanation. For older adults especially, that subtle fatigue can blend into the background of everyday aging. But sometimes it isn't age, it's the additive load that comes with every scoop. Bottom line, no product built on comfort should leave the body uneasy. KOS still insists its ingredients are safe, plant-based, and eco-friendly. All of that may be true. Yet the best proof of purity isn't in slogans or sustainability pledges. It's in how you feel an hour later. If you notice the pattern, the same bloating, the same fog, the same slow afternoon after every shake, that's your body's report card. You don't need lab equipment to understand it. You just need to listen. If a shake asks your body to push through discomfort, it is not the right shake. For people who once bought KOS for kindness, the lesson feels personal. The product meant to nourish ended up teaching a quieter truth. Sometimes the most honest feedback doesn't come from a label or a lawsuit, it comes from your own body. And when the body whispers, it's worth hearing. Back in December 2024, a quiet recall slipped past most headlines. One lot of organic plant-based protein chocolate was pulled from shelves after the FDA found undeclared peanut residue. Not a toxin, not a banned additive, but something far more dangerous for the people who trusted that label. For millions of Americans, peanuts aren't just an inconvenience. They're a trigger. Even a trace amount, a dusting invisible to the eye, can cause an allergic reaction within minutes. Hives, swelling, shortness of breath, even anaphylaxis. For families with children or seniors, managing food sensitivities clean isn't a lifestyle claim. It's a matter of safety. So when a brand built on the words organic and plant-based omits that warning, the betrayal cuts deeper than any lab number ever could. At first, the notice read like standard bureaucracy, a batch code, a best by date, a short line about undeclared peanuts. But the truth behind that short recall isn't simple. Because peanut protein doesn't wander into a powder by accident. It arrives through decisions. To understand how, you have to step into the factory. Most protein powders, even premium ones, are produced in shared facilities where plant proteins, whey, and sometimes nut-based formulas run through the same mixers and filling lines. Between products, teams perform what's called a validated allergen clean swabbing surfaces to ensure no residues remain. But when schedules tighten and production targets rise, validated can become visual. One screw thread missed one gasket unchecked, and microscopic peanut dust rides along to the next batch. That's the physical pathway. The paper one is worse. Label creation happens separately from mixing and filling, handled by marketing, regulatory, and packaging teams, juggling suppliers, formulas, and translations. If a temporary ingredient or a contract filler enters the picture and a change notice doesn't reach the label team, in time the front of the tub can still claim no major allergens, even when the recipe or environment says otherwise. None of this makes Orgain a villain. It makes them part of a system that quietly trades precision for efficiency. Shared lines mean lower costs. Fewer label versions mean fewer printing runs. Shorter changeovers mean more units shipped per shift. Every step is financially logical until one speck of peanut turns logic into liability. There's also a commercial temptation. Few brands admit warnings complicate marketing. Adding a line like produced on equipment that also processes peanuts can shrink your audience and seed doubt. Keeping the label clean helps it sell cleaner. The absence of a warning can be as profitable as the presence of a claim. Eventually, the recall went out in that calm, bureaucratic tone. Lot 417202P, Best Buy, June 2026. Possible undeclared peanuts. For anyone with an allergy, those few words meant danger where safety was promised. For the company, it meant explaining how an error so small reached so many homes. It's easy to call it an accident. Harder to admit it was predictable. When production, procurement, and marketing all pull towards speed and simplicity, the first casualty is caution. Sometimes what's missing hurts most. The fix isn't glamorous batch-level allergen tests, mandatory post-clean swabs, and label systems that freeze print approval when any supplier or formulation changes. Publish the testing logs. Let customers see the proof. Because organic shouldn't mean untouchable, it should mean accountable. And until the word clean includes complete honesty, Every scoop will carry a little residue of doubt. After so many labels, lawsuits, and lab reports, it's easy to feel discouraged as if trust itself were another ingredient gone missing. But not every scoop deserves suspicion. There are still brands that do the quiet work testing every batch, publishing their results, owning their mistakes before anyone has to ask. They don't just sell nutrition, they rebuild confidence. And that's where the bright side begins, with the people and companies proving that clean can still mean something real, because transparency, once practiced, is contagious. For once, the label didn't promise miracles or buzzwords. It simply showed a small blue seal, NSF certified for sport. No gold font, no sweeping claims, no influencer faces. Just proof printed quietly that every single batch of this powder was tested before it reached your hands. Unlike the rest, Clean Athlete built its name not on lifestyle imagery, but on discipline. It's the kind of brand you rarely see trending because it doesn't need to. Every tub of its Whey Isolate goes through a strict independent verification program, heavy metals, banned substances, microbial safety, the full checklist, before a single unit ships. Behind that little seal is a protocol that mirrors Olympic-level standards. Every batch verified, every result published, and that consistency, ironically, is what feels new. Behind the scenes, the process is slower, more expensive, and far less forgiving than the typical supplement playbook. Each supplier has to submit documentation for ingredient purity, while labs cross-check for contamination against NSF's database of restricted compounds. The powder doesn't move into production until the paperwork passes, and if even one parameter fails, the batch stops. That's not marketing. That's manufacturing restraint, the rarest quality in an industry obsessed with speed. In return, the product earns what most brands try to imitate: credibility. You don't have to trust Clean Athlete because it has already verified itself. The company doesn't hide behind broad phrases like plant-based, clean, or natural. It lists number standards and lock codes you can actually look up. For older consumers, people who've seen every health trend come and go, that's a quiet kind of honesty that lands deeper than slogans ever could. And perhaps that's the point. Clean isn't a claim here, it's a certificate. This powder isn't built for hype, it's built for consistency. Athletes use it because they can't afford surprises. Organizations like Major League Baseball and the NCAA approve it because the testing process is transparent. But the same rigor that protects professionals can reassure ordinary buyers too. Anyone who just wants to know what they're drinking every morning is exactly what the label says it is. For older viewers, this brand stands as a reminder that safety and simplicity don't have to conflict. Whey Isolate, when sourced correctly, tends to have naturally low heavy metal content and complete amino acid balance, easy on digestion, high in clarity, minimal additives. It's what protein was meant to be before it became a marketing word. In a marketplace crowded with unverified superfoods and flashy blends, Clean Athlete feels almost old-fashioned in the best way. There's a calm to its precision, a discipline that reflects something bigger than fitness, a belief that the work done in silence is what defines integrity. Clean isn't a feeling here, it's a fact checked by strangers with no stake in the sale. That may not sound exciting, but it's quietly radical. While others sell the idea of wellness, Clean Athlete sells the record of it. Each tub becomes a small act of accountability, not because someone demanded it, but because they believe the word clean deserved evidence. It's not the label that makes this powder pure, it's the process you'll never see. And maybe that's how trust should look: earned, verified, and real. Sometimes purity doesn't come from a lab, but from the land itself. AGN Root starts where most companies stop, at the very beginning, in the soil, the grass, and the quiet rhythm of Irish pastures that have been feeding dairy herds for centuries. There's no factory miracle here, no engineered perfection. Just a belief that if you start with something honest, you don't need to hide it behind marketing. At its beginning, AGN Roots made a choice that few modern nutrition companies dare to make, to trace everything. Every scoop of its grass-fed Whey Isolate can be tracked back to real farms across Southeast Ireland, where cows graze freely on open grass for more than 200 days a year. These herds aren't managed for yield alone. They're raised for welfare, soil balance, and environmental stewardship. That's not branding. That's agriculture done right. Through every pasture, there's an unbroken chain of care. The milk moves from grass to farmer to processor to lab, and every step is documented. The facility is Informed Sport certified, which means every batch undergoes independent testing for heavy metals, banned substances, and microcontaminants with results publicly available. Unlike most companies that summarize third-party tested in a footnote, AGN Roots posts the full certificate of analysis for each lot right on its website. Transparency, not advertising, does the talking. From farmer to factory, this discipline shows in taste too. Whey produced from grass-fed milk carries a distinct lightness, slightly creamier, naturally sweet, easier on digestion. For older consumers, that subtle difference matters more than branding ever could. It's not just about protein, it's about comfort, familiarity, and knowing the product came from land that values balance over volume. Beyond compliance, there's a quiet philosophy in how AGN Roots treats its supply chain. Instead of chasing superfood trends or flavor launches, they focus on preserving trust, the slow, rural kind that comes from people who still walk their fields. Their documentation reads more like a farmer's journal than a marketing brochure. Rainfall averages, grazing cycles, feed composition. You can sense that the company sees purity as something to protect, not to promote. For those who still care where things come from, this approach feels almost radical. In an era of glossy promises and borrowed terms like organic, AGN Roots redefines clean not as sterile but as alive. Its grass-fed sourcing supports biodiversity and limits carbon emissions not because it photographs well, but because the process leaves less to fix later. Clean here isn't a finish line, it's a habit. Purity isn't promised here, it's traced. There's comfort in that idea. You don't have to memorize chemical names or decode ingredient lists. You just follow the trail backward and it leads somewhere real. Maybe that's why AGN Roots rarely needs to defend itself online, because when the truth is public, rumor loses its oxygen. Each scoop tells a quiet story: a cow on open grass, rain on soil rich with clover, a farmer who still calls his herd by name. It's the kind of simplicity that can't be replicated in a factory or engineered in a lab, and maybe that's enough. Because when a company shows you where it begins, you already know where it stands. AGN Roots doesn't try to sell perfection, it just keeps the process visible. And in today's world, that might be the purest thing of all. In the end, it was never about the protein. It was about the choices behind it, what we call clean, and whether those words still mean anything. We've seen the labels that overpromise, the powders that hide behind fine print, and the few that earn trust the hard way. Together they tell one story: purity isn't a marketing term, it's a behavior. Because the truth is clean can't be bought, it has to be proven. It lives in the soil that feeds the herd in the tests that verify the batch and the honesty that appears before apology. And that's what matters most. Not perfection, not fear, but clarity. So the next time you reach for a tub on the shelf, look past the claims and find the work behind them. That's where healthy really begins, with proof, not promise.